Good morning, everybody. I was going to say it's lovely to see such a big crowd, but now that I'm up here, I'm not quite sure. But no, in all fairness, it is. It's fantastic to see such a turnout. So my name is Amanda, and basically, I'm just going to, for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you snippets of my own recovery journey. So it began back in 2015 when I was admitted to an acute unit. And while this was the last place I wanted to be, it is what I needed at that particular stage in my life to keep me safe. At that point, I had hit crisis point. I spent 8 weeks there. I needed that time to physically recuperate and to build on my emotional well-being. It gave me the opportunity to hit the reset button on life. Prior to this, my life was fueled with depression, anxiety, and alcohol. I used alcohol as an anesthetic to kill the pain, not realizing that it was the very thing that was actually paralyzing me. I spent over 15 years in active addiction, and that was due to various reasons. Not being able to ask for help was one. Stigma was another. There was many reasons that I couldn't go for help. I was the type of person that let things build up inside. This time allowed me to reflect on my life and where, if anywhere, I was going. I realized everything needed to change. People, places, and things. Prior to this point, I had given up on life, and I had no hope. I had no confidence, no self-esteem, no self-worth. I didn't believe recovery was possible, as every area in my life had been impacted. I was one of the lucky ones. I had an assistant occupational therapist who really believed in me. She acknowledged my strengths and built on these. She encouraged me to become an active participant in my own self-care. And for me, that was a pivotal point. I had to take personal responsibility. She used to say, "You're doing all the good work." But even a little statement like that can help somebody to become motivated to continue on their journey. She also introduced me to the Regari and brought me over to it. She encouraged me to become involved. Today, thank God, I'm living in the solution, not the problem. Today, I have hope. Today, I believe that recovery is possible. Recovery takes time. It's a process. It's not an easy road, but it's definitely one worthwhile taking. Today, I have peace of mind. I sleep at night. I can enjoy my dinner. And I love my work. Ironically, my workplace is only stone's throw away from the acute unit. So in distance, I haven't come that far. But overall in life, I've come on leaps and bounds. Today, I'm peer educator at the Regari Recovery College. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank every person who has made it possible for me to realise my dreams, with the hope of helping someone else realise theirs. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Francis Walsh, and like Amanda said, I've been asked to share my recovery story with yourselves. My background is in nursing, and I won't even tell you how many years I'm qualified, but my type of training at the time was apprenticeship style, where I learned from key champions, key people that were, I role modeled myself off, and I had the theory component to it. At the time, you kind of come into a system where the culture is already established and the culture is already set. And as a nurse, I kind of fell into that role. And at the time, the core components of my training was to work with people and their families to make sure people were safe, that they were well looked after, and that famous word, cared for. And for years, my career grew and grew within that model, and I felt that I was very competent and capable in my role. Then I moved to the West, and I worked on many different community mental health teams who provide services in the community for people that live in the community. And each of those teams that I worked in had a different philosophy and a different way of working. Most of them were similar to what Charlie mentioned this morning, where people were a system that was set up to look after people and to mind people. So when I moved to one of the teams here in the West, they had a very different philosophy, and that was to let people find themselves and to grow within themselves and find their own place in the community and their own place in life and determine their own goals and destinations. I have to be honest, I found that a very big struggle because I was had worked in a type of model all my life for years, and it took an awful lot for me to kind of expand my thinking and to view things differently. And really, my recovery journey as a nurse started when I got involved in some recovery education, when I started working in a different way with service users, family members, and NGO colleagues, where we heard everyone's voice around the table and how to do things differently. And not that what the model that I was working with, there was nothing wrong with it. Everybody was doing their best, were doing what they felt was right, and no harm or distress came to anyone. But the new model really fostered the culture of letting people grow, find their own way of life and find their own way of choosing what they wanted to achieve out of life and living the life that they chose themselves. So it took me about, I suppose, 2 or 3 years to educate myself, to broaden my mind in a different way of working. And really what the crucial turning point was me is when I began to see the person and their family as people, not as something that was wrong with them, where normally I was trying to fix people, to find out, take the worries away from people, find the solutions for their problems. And just as Amanda said, it's about trying to support the person to find that solution for themselves. And that is actually hard work. It might seem, it's hard to step back sometimes, because sometimes out of having a good heart, I was kind of jumping in there to find the solutions, to find the answers for everyone's issues and guiding them along the right path. Where now I'm more aware is that I actually have learned to work alongside people to support them to find the path for themselves. And that has taken me, as I said, 2 or 3 years with numerous working along fantastic staff members who have guided me and supported me to find a new way of working, educating myself to be the best nurse that I can be, having an open mind to change, having an open mind to new ways of working, and also opening my mind to working with service users and family and members in a different way. So like Amanda, I'd like to thank the service users, family members and staff who have moulded me to be what I am today as a nurse. I might be a bit biased, but I think I do a good job most of the time anyway. So I would like to thank those people for guiding me along my recovery journey.
Hello? That's working good. I'm a bit scared now because, you see, we all agreed we'd go to the podium and now they're all staying sitting down and I haven't got the courage to go on my own. So I'm staying here as well. Okay, so good morning. My name is Teresa Keene. I'm the Development Officer with Mental Health Ireland, and they're a national voluntary organisation founded in 1966 to promote positive mental health and wellbeing. There are 9 of us and we work across the country in the different CHOs. So we have Nicola Morley down there, who I hope she'll give us a little wave. And we have Bill Vaughan, the bold Bill from Donegal, and he's down there as well. So in terms of what we do, we work alongside our mental health associations and they're spread throughout the country. So most of the MHAs are run by healthcare professionals, volunteers who have lived experience and family members. So and our strategy at the moment is in terms of lining up with the mental health framework, ensuring that we have that tripartite. So the mental health associations promote positive mental health and they aim to support people who experience mental health difficulties on their journey. So one way in which we do that is by supporting the person discover or recreate a meaningful role. So to start with, in some ways the rhetoric around meaning can almost be the same as the initial response to distress. So you have people suggesting things like, why don't you go for a walk? Or why don't you take a course and see if you can discover a hidden talent? So, but the reality is that a person, when they're so overwhelmed as a consequence of mental distress, they may have parked their role. Mental distress can affect all of us, and we're an extremely eclectic population. And our meaningful roles as parents, sisters, employees, sons, daughters, brothers, runners, cyclists, any numerous role you can think of, or artists can be unintentionally parked or even forgotten. And this can result in social exclusion even, because we feel marginalised. So the roles need to be reasserted at times, or even recreated. And I suppose what we want to think about is, how can we make that happen? The associations can help make that happen. They're founded by local volunteers, and a lot of them are founded in response to the unmet needs of people with mental health difficulties in that specific area. So the associations really aim to provide a welcoming, non-judgmental space to people to share experience, to find support, and to participate in activities that promote well-being. So I'm going to give you an example later on just of some of these comments about groups like CHIME, Hearing Voices and Friends. They're all hosted, for example, in Mayo Mental Health Association on weekday nights. These conversations would invite people to develop a narrative, and often the meaning is made between the listener and the person who's speaking. The peer groups like these offer identification, freedom from isolation and loneliness, and that opportunity to develop narrative gives people a platform to be heard, acknowledged, validated, affirmed. People often who are deep in introspection or rumination will really appreciate when they're heard. They mightn't even remember what they said at the time, but often it'll be the feeling or the reaction that they'll take away with them that will bring the healing. One of the people who attends one of the groups is a girl called Maria. She's used the services for 6 years. And she says, I now understand more about myself, and I have strategies that help me get through. Attending the group and listening to others helped me remember that I once lived, I loved, was a girlfriend, I worked, was an employee, I studied, was a student, and I used to cycle. The group gave me hope I could do those things again. And with the help, support, and example of other members, I'm now a wife and mother. I have a life that people once told me I would never have. And I got a new bike from Dundale too. There's no excuse. Arm yourselves with the information. It's all out there, and the information stands. And be sure to ask lots of questions. We'll be available to talk afterward. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It is on. Maybe I'd prefer if it wasn't. I'm here as a family member. I have had interaction with the mental health services for many years, as we've had many family members who've had some serious difficulties. In the early years, we were very frightened and alone. It takes a long time to adjust to living with mental health illness in the family. Along the way, we met many professionals, and with various different results. Some didn't necessarily have the service user at the centre of the work, but some did, and always have been working in the way that the person is at the centre in front of their work, like what the service is in general now. My active role as a family member started about 18 years ago, when I was asked to go forward and have some training to take part in an RE team, where I was the family member, where we've been talking to staff and I suppose explaining the family's position and situation, and I suppose maybe the professionals now are more using the skills and knowledge that families have and have built up over the years. Doing this work has been life-changing for me and for our family. Prior to that, we were quite pessimistic about the future, both for ourselves and our son, who's seriously ill. But in recent years, we've come to believe that things can get better, that the way the services work now and the input of the family being taken into account, so that staff get to know their service user better, because our son doesn't speak very much about his situation or his illness. And some staff have told me in recent times, while they know him for several years, they only now are getting to know him. But because we're involved and able to be let the staff know the real person, not just the symptoms, their skills and their interests and things like that, which can stay buried when a person is really ill. I think being involved like this is very empowering for us as a family, and it makes us hold hope for our son going forward and feel that that there's a better life out there. It may never be the life we might have expected, but that's okay. It also has given us strength to deal with what we have to deal with. So it's really we can see that there are goals that he will be able to achieve. It might not be what we would have thought one day, but that's all right. It's good enough for today. Thank you.
Good morning again, everybody. It's working, thank you. I hope I am. I'd just like to share a little bit about my own experience of my recovery journey, I suppose. And because at the beginning is always a good place to start. And I grew up in a home where there were mental health challenges, where there were addiction issues. And what I learned there, was that, mental health, you didn't talk about it, you hoped it would go away, you denied it. So I became stigmatized, I suppose. And in my late teens, I developed my own mental health challenges. And my first reaction was, this isn't happening. How do I get away from this? So I couldn't accept the diagnoses I was given. And I thought my life was over. I was 19 years of age. All my friends were going off to college, and I was going off to hospital. So I couldn't accept that. And for the next 10 years, I tried to escape that reality of my life. And the result of that was, I suppose, untreated mental illness, psychosis, self-harm, addiction, all sorts of life crises, hospitalizations. But I eventually did come into recovery, and instrumental in that was actually peer support. Somebody came to visit me who I had seen in a hospital bed beside me, who I knew their story, but they had recovered. And they were, I suppose, able to set an internal question for me. Maybe if that's possible for them, it's also possible for me. And they gave me that hope. And that was something that nobody else could give me, because I couldn't believe what other people were saying to me, well-intentioned and all as they were, but I could believe my own eyes of what had transformed in this person's life. And I suppose that was the start of me coming into my recovery journey. And for me, recovery is about relationship and making connections with life again. And the first person I had to connect with was myself, and I had to accept who I was and what I was. And it didn't necessarily mean accepting what other people said or thought about me, but I had to accept that there's some issue in my life that needs addressing. And I suppose that was the time I stopped running and started looking for the solution. And then it was about, recovery is about finding out, becoming the best person that I or anyone else can be, finding out my strengths and weaknesses. And, that's a staged process. And I think in the lady in America who's the famous recovery mentor, can't think of her name now, but she talks about recovery, is about being the best person you can be. And I never in my life kind of imagined that I would be sitting or standing here today and talking to you like this. Because there was a period in my life when I locked myself in my room. I wouldn't come out. I'd only come out at night. So I suppose recovery has no limits. And sometimes I like to describe it. It's like standing on the cliffs of Moher. And I recall the first time I visited the cliffs of Moher. And you look out and you see one cliff ahead of you. And you think, I must go out there. And you get there, and then you see the other cliff, and you say, I must go out there. And recovery for me is about horizons. And then the first horizon for me was to be able to come out of my room and not be afraid, to go into town, to go back to education, to get a job, to learn to drive a car. And it's still going on. Now I can drive my car in Dublin. Recovery is very much developmental or something. And it's about, I suppose, connecting, with people. And, that was something I could never do. And there's a song, which I won't sing for you now. Maybe if I was in CHO1. It's a ballad called The Valley of Slieve na Mon. And there's a line in that says, alone, all alone in a crowded room. And that was me, because I never could connect with anyone. And I have a friend who's a peer support worker. And he told me a story about he used to go and visit a man in a very rural area of Ireland, in a mountainous area with nobody around. And he said, how do you live here? Do you not get lonely here? And he said, no, I don't get lonely. I only get lonely when I'm with people, because I can't relate to them. And that was me. So I was being able to feel comfortable with myself first, and then I was able to engage with other people. And that's very important in that we provide opportunities for people to mix with others in our recovery processes. So things like recovery colleges and peer support and the kind of work that Teresa is talking about is very important, that we help people connect back into real life. So it's not about creating silos within services, but it's about bringing us back into the wider community. So that's really all I've got to say. And thank you all for listening.
We do have some questions that came via our poll. And one of them is, what supported you in becoming empowered as a family member? So maybe Patricia.
I think initially it came from being asked to go for training to become a member of an RE team. It made me feel that what I had to say and what I knew was valued. And that then helped me, we'll say, as a family member to grow. And I think there's education around that. I think you probably have to accept your situation first. And then you need to educate yourself around it, and then you have to, and then I think you become empowered as a result of that, and you become more accepting of the new life that may arise for your family member. It probably won't be what you might have laid out as the idea when your child was young, but it's what the reality is now, and there can be plenty of joy in that.
Thank you.
My name is Liam, and I just have a question for the full group. So my question is, do we believe there's a negative attitude towards medication? And is this leading to a culture of non-compliance?
Thank you for the question. I suppose what we would say in terms of recovery and good recovery practice would be that whatever the service user decides for themselves is what they need to do for recovery. That's what we should support, and that involves offering choices for treatment and interventions, and then that includes medication. And for some people find medication very helpful. And what we would be promoting is informed choice, that people understand what the medication does, how long they're going to be on it, what other impacts it may have on their life. And there's a discussion and a support system around that. And I suppose, unfortunately, there has been kind of a misconnection, if you like, between recovery and then maybe, clinical services, and particularly maybe the medical focus of clinical services, that they're not compatible. So what I can say is that I think if we step back, hopefully everybody wants the one outcome, and then that's a better result for the person using the service, that they can experience recovery as they understand it. And if that medication will help them achieve that, then they should be supported in using that option. And so I suppose we're pro recovery. We're not anti anything. Whatever will help somebody recover, we endorse. Is there a negative attitude towards medication? There is no doubt that for some people they just haven't got the balance right. And that it's difficult for people to take medication, and maybe that's their choice, saying that the benefits of this are outweighed by the negatives. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's non-compliance. It's maybe a choice they're making, but I would hope that people in those situations would be supported around to make the best choice they can and get the best help they can.
Thank you.
Okay, so just another question that has come in. It's directed at Amanda. It's Amanda, what were the biggest challenges you encountered when dealing with the services, and what could we have done differently to help more? Nice, simple one.
Well, I suppose for me, one of the biggest difficulties was, I guess it was kind of like dual diagnosis, where addictions was one part of it, and then like anxiety and depression was another part. And sometimes I think that you're put into a category, like you're either in this section or you're in this section. And I'd rather to see the two being dealt with together. I think it was Peter McFerry who said, that there are too many borders between a mental illness and addiction. And definitely that's something that I'd like to see looked at, to look at the person in a more holistic way. Because very often, we can miss the root of the problem if we don't look at both together. And that, to me, is what leads to many people going through the revolving door. So, yeah, I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked at.
Thanks, Amanda. There's another question here for the group. What advice would you give to someone struggling to find hope? Okay, thanks, France.
I suppose I can come from my own experience of working in the services, and over the last 25 years I've worked with people in all stages of recovery, both from, as Michael and Amanda described it here, where people have had no hope of life could be better. And I suppose what I've learned through the years of working with people and seeing people as people, there is always something there of a strength or a capability that is just as Patricia said, sometimes can get lost due to the situation the person is in. So it's number one, getting to know that person, I think, as a human, and finding that key thing that they believe in that will help them to take that first step towards recovery. And that sometimes, I know from my own use, sometimes as a clinician we try to find that for somebody, which doesn't actually help. What we have to do is try to support someone to find that for themselves. It can be a long process, but when you get to know someone and build that relationship and that trust, these hopeful nuggets do appear in a time of crisis and in a time of distress. So it's about, for me, the key thing is building that relationship and supporting the person to find that positives and strengths in their lives, which can be challenging and can take time, but it does work.
Yeah, I think also, I think it's Deegan or Patricia Deegan, or who talks about, the role of the clinician or the healthcare professional as facilitating the recovery. And she often compares it to a garden in spring that you may have planted and the bulbs aren't showing. You don't go out and start giving them a wigging and saying, what's wrong with that fella now? Why is he not growing? You actually think about, well, actually you might in a bad day, but you actually think about the nourishment in the soil, or whether it has the proper alkaline or whatever balance to support the growth. And I suppose you touched on it. I think that's really the most challenging area, and certainly I felt it myself when working with people with long-term, what's classed as long-term enduring mental health difficulties, because it's key to be patient. And I've often heard, and I've talked about it myself, the peer relationship where the recovery happens, often you are holding the hope. And I suppose as a clinician or a practitioner, that's happened in the past. And realizing that when the person is ready, that epiphany or that transformation will occur, but I cannot decide on when and where that's going to happen. And I think that's the hardest part of all of those, to be a peer, to be a clinician, to be in whatever capacity you are in supporting somebody, to be able to just hold that hope and wait until that person is ready. And it can take a considerable amount of time. And although we say it, an attitudinal change is really needed in the service, it is, but time is really needed in the services. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Teresa.
Can I just like to ask you to put your hands together again for the panel? Thanks very much.